Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to the Woodlands Community Centre. Just going to run through a few housekeeping rules before we begin. We are not expecting a fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the assembly point. Councillors will be using their tablets and mobile devices to access the agenda for this meeting. We always welcome people to come and speak here at the meeting, and although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting, members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. But when the light is amber, you will have 30 seconds remaining. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. However, once the debate has started, it will not be possible to invite or receive further comments from the floor. This is because this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but we will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting, and we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting if they can and continue in private. This is not a decision we would wish to take, and we would never do so lightly. The meeting will be recorded and it will be placed upon the Council's website. If any member of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please let a member of staff know. And there is more information available on our website. So, firstly, welcome everybody. And this is Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath Local Area Committees meeting. I'm going to turn to Agenda 1, which is Item 1, which is apologies. Laura, do we have any apologies for this evening?
We do, from Councillor Tidridge, Chair, who to note is joining us remotely but can take part in the debate but will not be able to vote on any of the decisions this evening.
I don't know if everybody can see, but Jin is present on the screen. She doesn't have any voting rights, but she does wish to listen to the debate. Thank you very much. Welcome, Jin. Hello. Yeah, I will pass your thanks on to Laura and the team. Okay. If there's no further, the rest of us are here. Moving on to Item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? And if so, please indicate now. Oh, Councillor Marsh.
I'd just like to declare that I'm a Fair Oak Parish Councillor because I'm aware that something's being tabled about finances that are going to go towards Fair Oak Parish Council. So although it's not a pecuniary interest and I know I'm allowed to vote for the interest of transparency, I'd like to say I am a parish councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Couldrey, and I may be able to guess.
I am also a parish councillor, and consequently, in the interest of, I just want to make that clear, I also, in relation to Stoke Park farm concentration, I live very close, almost on top of it, so I don't have a technical interest, but I am very interested.
Thank you very much. Those interests will be noted. Okay, we will now move on to... we have no specific public participation other than those people which have registered under specific items. So I can move on to Item 4, which are the minutes. Members, I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at the minutes. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Broomfield, a seconder. Councillor Marsh. Is there any debate or areas of clarity? No? Can I see all in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Councillor Dean. Thank you very much, members. Okay, now we're moving on to item number 5, which is my announcements. As we only met recently, as you can imagine, there is not a lot to bring you up to date on. So I think that we will move swiftly on so we can enable our members of the public who have come to speak on the next item to talk. And I will come back to the report which has been tabled after them, if that is all right with everybody. Yes? Okay, thank you. So we shall move on to item 6, which are the traffic regulation orders. I am going to ask, is it Toni? Yeah. Can I please ask Toni to present the report to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Engineers were asked by councillors to investigate road safety, obstruction or nuisance parking problems for various roads in the Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath area. New or amendments to existing parking controls were proposed and a statutory consultation to introduce these restrictions was advertised on the 13th of January. Consultation was undertaken by means of a public notice on Eastleigh Borough Council's website, on the Hampshire County Council Public Notices portal, published in the Hampshire Independent newspaper and posted on street furniture in the vicinity of the proposed restrictions. Representations were received both in support of and objection to each scheme. The report summarises the comments received, gives engineers feedback and recommends how to proceed. I will now look at each of the sites in turn and ask councillors to make a decision to implement or withdraw the proposal. Please note the agency agreement between Hampshire County Council and Eastleigh, one at a time, and Eastleigh Borough Council is being terminated on the 31st of March 2023. So to defer a TRO will not be an option on this occasion. So our first site is Abbotsbury Road. Do we have any speakers on this one?
I'm just going to check, Toni, that there are no public participations
Okay.
under the drove. Oh, sorry. Abbotsbury Road. I'm sorry. I
Okay,
down the
no
list.
problem.
We have somebody for the drove, and that will be Cotswolds and Botley. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So Abbotsbury, we can just continue with.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, members of the public.
This proposal looks to resolve issues with short-term parking at the junction with Torwood Gardens. Normally this parking is associated with school travel. The proposal reinforces the provisions of the Highway Code, Rule 243, which says do not park opposite or within 10 metres of a junction. No representations were received. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions on this item? Any debate? All I'll mention is that I was contacted by concerned residents in this area due to, in particular, school-related parking because it is leading to our infant and junior school in Bishopstoke. So I am happy to support this. So I would like to see if anybody would propose it. Councillor Dean, anybody to second? Councillor Marsh just beat Councillor Broomfield. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now we will go on to the second. Yeah, can I? Because I keep moving up and down. We'll move on to the second item, which is Ascot Road. Is there anybody wishing to speak on Ascot Road? No, thank you. I'll move back to our officer, Toni Johnson. Please continue, Toni.
Okay. The proposal looks to resolve the known safety issues along Knoll Lane caused by inconsiderate and obstructive parking. The proposal for Ascot Road looks to regulise parking on both sides of the road, which causes obstruction. 16 objections were received to these proposals. 1 representation expressed support. Thank you, Chair.
Members, do you have any questions on this one? Councillor Marsh.
There we go. Can I ask if those objections were to Ascot or to Knoll, or are they together? Together. Okay. So the objections in principle are to both. So at this moment, are we just talking about Ascot, or are we speaking about Ascot and Knoll?
You can vote them together or
Personally, I
individually.
prefer to do them separately, if that's okay.
Okay, Ascot first.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Marsh.
Okay, sorry, if it's Ascot we're talking about, then my question is, does the restriction need to extend so far along the road? Because I know residents who contacted me were querying if they had no objection to going to the first driveway, but they had an objection to how far along it goes, with the concern being that it will push the problem much further into Ascot Road. So is there a reason it has to extend as far as it is?
No, councillors can reduce a parking restriction. We always advertise a little more, and then that gives you an option in terms of adjusting for feedback that you receive, so it can be reduced.
Councillor Broomfield.
Right. Can you hear me now, Mother? Yes. Thank you. I would tend to support that because I've also had representations that the distance is too long, that actually something a little shorter. It's mostly to deter, I suspect, dangerous parking at school times. And I think it probably just goes a little bit too far at the moment.
If you wish to make an amendment, before we, do you have a question, or are you going to propose an amendment? Sorry.
I actually first want a question, and then I will probably want an amendment.
Please ask your question.
Sorry. The question is, what is the differential effect on parking on either side of the road? Because I do find when I go down Ascot Road, there's a problem. It's not huge, but there is there. And is it just one side, or is it both, or the combination of the two that is causing the problem?
We have proposed both, but you one or other side. We would always suggest restricting the parking on the direction out of Ascot Road onto Knoll Lane if you were going to go with one side or the other.
So your preference, if we were to go one side or the other, would be to keep the restriction on the left as you're looking at that map?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've just got Andy to point out the one we would suggest keeping.
Yeah. Thank you.
There we go.
Well, I do have a proposal that we cut back the one on the right quite substantially, because that is for the first driveway, possibly, yes, about a little bit further down, just beyond that, yeah.
Okay, so if we're going to have an amendment, so we haven't really got into the debate part, but we'll go to the amendment. So your proposal is to reduce it to what length, and then we will need a seconder, Councillor Couldrey. Councillor Marsh will second, but can we have to what point specifically do you want it to?
Sorry, just a little bit above that pointer. Just there, lovely, yeah.
About that.
About that. It's just to get the cars away from, so that we can actually get into the road, or residents can get into the road.
So that's proposed by Councillor Couldrey and seconded by Councillor Marsh. I'm just going to ask the traffic officer to confirm that that still is beyond the legal 10-metre minimum requirement.
Still over 10 metres. So just for clarity, what I would say there is that on the eastern side of Ascot Road, from its junction with Knoll Lane to a point in line with the northernmost building line. Are we? Of number 1, yeah. Okay,
With that amendment, we have a proposer and we have a seconder. Can I see all members who are in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Now we are moving on to Botley Road. I will ask Toni to present again, and then we have a representation, and I will ask the speaker to come forward once Toni has finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal looks to resolve a parking issue which causes obstruction for drivers and pedestrians. Councillors have the option to limit the restriction to apply only to school times following consideration of the representations. 2 representations were received in support of the full proposal. That was from Hampshire County Council's passenger transport team and 1 from a local resident. 2 representations were received objecting to the proposal.
Thank you very much. Could I now ask Lorraine Bowers to present to the committee? Welcome. And I believe somebody will start You have 3 minutes.
Traffic lights. Hi. So I'm Lorraine Bowers. I live on Ivy Lee. So it's really difficult to show you, but as you will see, I'm the middle one, just there. So we were here way before any other resident in Fair Oak, I'm presuming, as those houses were built a long, long time ago. We were unfortunate enough to not be given parking when I bought the house 12 years ago. However, I did speak to local police, and I spoke to local neighbours, and I spoke to the person I bought it from, and I was told that it was perfectly fine to park outside, but all 4 wheels on the road. However, we had lots of people beeping, and so we decided that we'd move in a little bit, and we would always make sure that we were very conscious for wheelchairs and prams. Unfortunately, not everybody is, and unfortunately, some people do park there and do restrict the passage. Now, we don't have options. We have a courtyard front garden, which is this big to our window. I haven't got anywhere I can put parking. I'd quite happily fund that. I've also asked the local Eastleigh Borough Council, highways, if I can buy the bit of derelict land, which is next door to my neighbours. It would fit 3 cars on there. We've had Hampshire highways out. I've actually even parked there when it was flattened. Because I did park there, I believe that somebody obviously phoned up and complaints were made. I was actually trying to get my car off the road. Complaints were made, and so they put wooden barriers round and a dog poo bin, which is not really very helpful at all. I was offering to pay for that piece of land. As I've got pictures on my phone, it's actually not even looked after. It's got brambles on it, it's got animal excrement, it's got rubbish on it. So it's actually not even a used piece of land. So I did feel that that was a little bit unfair. We do have, when I bought the house, it was just myself and my children, so I only needed 1 car. I'm a social worker, so I need to be able to get out of my house quick as I can. And actually now my family have grown up, they've got their own cars, which is, unfortunate, but families grow. So, so I am opposed to part of the restrictions that are being proposed. Sorry, you're on amber.
Thank you very much for your representation. Members, have you got any questions of our officer on Botley Road proposals? Councillor Couldrey.
I'd like to ask the traffic experts whether there is anything that can be done to accommodate residents parking there without causing obstruction.
Not on carriageway without causing obstruction. So the problem is with parking outside those dwellings, they're reasonably close to the traffic signals, the main traffic signal junction with Eastleigh Road, and traffic can sometimes, if something big is trying to go through, traffic can back up. So I wouldn't suggest residents parking in that area.
Any other questions? Councillor Marsh?
I just wanted to ask a similar question, really. So would it be unreasonable to not have markings outside those dwellings based on the objection and have restrictions everywhere else in that area that you were proposing? Would that not be feasible? Would it still cause too much of a danger?
It's more about, this came about because of complaints on the footway parking primarily. However, it is a classified road. It's a very busy road. And when we start to allow parking, that can grow very easily. So particularly at school times, it's easy if a parent is late just to turn up and park behind that those line of parked cars and take the risk. Really, primarily, we're trying to deal with the footway issue, though, which is the significant safety issue, because we wouldn't want to push wheelchair users and people with buggies into the road on a classified road.
Could I ask a question? Because actually, I have been contacted and seen the lack of pedestrian. So for our vulnerable road users, which is our pedestrians and then our cyclists, is there any way that you can limit parking to stop people park, so that they could park on the road, but they are not permitted to park on the pavement? Is there any... That's the thing I'm not sure about. Does that make sense? I may have not worded it very well, but...
No, we think we understand what you're asking. I think you're asking for a prohibition of footway parking. What we aren't sure of whether legally that is a higher restriction. Could you give us a couple of minutes? Just Andy will do some looking up quickly, and can we come back to it? Is that...
If members are all right, shall we move... Oh, sorry, Councillor Broomfield, as you've also got a question on this.
Yeah, just a quick one, actually for Lorraine. If the bit outside Ivy Lee, Roseley and Holmley, which is proposed 8 till 9 and 3 till 4, if that was term time only, would that make life any easier for you?
Not really, because I live there. I don't turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we don't see school users come there to park their cars beside our cars. In fact, it's the only other cars parked there are our neighbours, and they have got 2 spaces each and 2 garages. So actually, we are the only ones without any parking. We would happily have the permit. We would happily, but all of the restrictions that are proposed would mean that we would be walking for 10 to 15 minutes to actually get our cars. And also we wouldn't be able to drop off our shopping. I've got a grandchild. It really is going to impact. We've had our house valued. It's going to drop the value by £30,000 because we can't park outside. I mean, that's neither here nor there, because I don't particularly want to move. I'd much rather have my nice house with parking or parking nearby.
I just remind members that when we enter debate, we aren't allowed to go back to residents or speakers. I'm very sorry. Sorry. If members would be all right, I would... Oh, have you got an answer? I was going to say, I was just going to move us on to the next one and then come back to this.
Okay, because we've advertised a prohibition of waiting, that covers from the back of the footway wholly to the centre of the carriageway. What we think we can do, because we can reduce restrictions but not make them higher level through the process, we could consider a prohibition of footway parking for that small section outside the cottages only. However, it would mean that we had to put up a sign in front of those dwellings. It's not a massive sign, but it's important to note that there would be a pole and sign with a prohibition of footway. Okay.
I'm ever so sorry. We genuinely are not permitted to have further conversation. Councillor Marsh.
So can I clarify, that means that we would still permit the resident to park on the road, but they would not be permitted to park on the pavement? Is that what you're proposing or suggesting that might be an option?
That was my suggestion.
Yes, that's correct, but we would need to agree an extent with you. So the boundary, so the double yellow lines for the rest of the restriction, I think we're content with, or you will vote on that. It's just we need to agree the extent outside the cottages of the verge control.
Councillor Broomfield and then Councillor Marsh. Councillor Broomfield.
Just a question then for highways. Looking at the supporting notes on the agenda on page 9, paragraph 7, that it states that Hampshire County Council Passenger Transport also supported the proposals. So I'm not unhappy to go with a proposal to make life easier, but would Hampshire have any, given that parking is moving back to them, would Hampshire have any reason to reject or overrule that suggestion?
They will have the power to revoke any provision in a TRO. With the powers moving back to them, they can go through a similar process to what we're going through tonight and change an order or remove it altogether. I would suggest that passenger transport, it wasn't Hampshire Highways that objected, it was passenger transport, and they will look at the fact that it's on a classified road and try and look towards the expeditious movement of those vehicles that they represent. They won't have detailed knowledge of the area like councillors do.
One other question, if I may.
Yeah, Councillor Broomfield.
So, other people than the residents of Ivy League could park in those spaces, or it would be merely a sort of residence parking?
No, anybody could park there. A residence parking scheme would be an escalation of the restriction.
Councillor Marsh.
I do feel for these residents, because if they had an alternative, fair enough, but they are really stuck. So I'd like to propose that we accept all of the TROs, but with an amendment in front of the house, literally in front of those cottages, that there's no parking on the pavement, but that we have that amendment in place.
I presume you'll be coming back to the committee to fund the... Is the pole and the signage covered, or would that have to come out of the developers' contributions?
You would have a reduction by going from a double yellow line to a verge parking, so you'd make savings on the lines, so the difference would be minimal.
Thank you for confirming that. Councillor Dean.
Yeah, sorry, the officer just said about removing double yellow line. That bit would, the way I read that map, was only going to be a single yellow line anyway, because it was a restricted parking rather than a complete no parking. So ultimately as well, does that mean there would have been signposts or posts put in to designate what the times were for the restricted parking? So it's just literally a different sign being put on the post. If that's the case, ultimately it's not costing anything. I'll be agreeing with any proposal to just completely remove that restricted section other than the pavement parking.
Yeah, that's the proposal.
The complete part of it, that's really odd.
So, can I have a proposer? Sorry, Councillor Couldrey.
For clarity, that is the same area as shown in with a green line rather than a blue line on the plans that we've been given. Lovely. Good,
that
thank you.
will be the, yes.
Lovely.
But that was to have it weighted restricted, but instead this will be no footpath parking, because the people we need to protect here are the pedestrians at the end of the day, because they are the people that put themselves in risks when they walk out into the road to go past parked cars. And the same with cyclists, and it's on a route to school. So, with that in mind, I think we have a way forward. Does this all make sense? Yes? So, can I have a proposer, Councillor Marsh, and a seconder, Councillor Broomfield? Sorry, Councillor Couldrey, you were just picked to the post. And all in favour of those amendments? Okay, so it's agreed. Thank you. Toni?
Just for clarity, do you want me to do a quick explanation of what we've decided for the public participation side of things?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So we've decided to implement the TRO as advertised, with the exception of the section shown in green, which will now not be restricted in terms of on-road parking. It's just we won't be able to have any parking on the footway for that length of green line. Okay.
I hope that was clear. Thank you. Following that TRO, we're now moving on to, which one are we on to? We were, members, going to be discussing Breach Lane. This got a bit confusing because I did remind officers that I had felt that we'd already agreed Breach Lane historically, and it had been put into place. Then there was confusion as to whether it had or it hadn't because of a previous section 106, but it turns out it is already in place. So rather than go through the rigmarole of having a presentation on it, I'm going to ask that we withdraw this one. So I'm going to propose that we withdraw the proposed one, and Councillor Dean will second it. All in favour? Excellent, thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to Church Road, E. Sorry, I've got to go backwards and forwards. Okay, so we have no public participation, and I will go straight to Toni. Thank you, Toni.
Okay, this proposal is a minor adjustment to allow the restriction to mirror the existing hatched lining at the junction and reinforces the provision of the Highway Code. No representations were received for this element of the TRA.
Any questions from members? Essentially, this is the same as what was there, but it's being put back in so that it's seen and is enforceable now. So can I have a proposer and a seconder? So Councillor Dean proposed and Councillor Marsh seconded, and all in favour? It's agreed. We're going to move on to Councillors now. We do have some public representation, but I shall ask the officer to present first, and then I shall move on to our presenters. Thank you. Toni.
Thank you. This proposal is to reduce the current level of obstruction caused by short-term parking at school arrival and pick-up times. The recommendation is for the proposal to be slightly reduced in length following representations received. 2 expressions of support were received for this proposal. 3 objections were also received. Thank you.
Can I now ask Colin Russell to present to the committee? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm Colin Russell and I reside at number 9 Cotswolds, one of 5 properties served by a private driveway at the far end of Cotswolds, the western end. My wife and I were in favour of the original proposal by the borough engineer to install parking restrictions at school times along the whole of the south side of Cotswolds in front of numbers 1 to 4, including the turning bay. We wish, however, to raise our concerns regarding the proposed amendment to the original plan. The amendment being to not restrict parking during school arrival and departure times in the turning area between numbers 3 and 4. The reason given for the proposed amendment being that the occupants of those properties had stated A, that there were no parking issues in the turning area, and B, to allow their friends and family on occasions to park overhanging the turning area. It's simply untrue to say that no one parks or waits in the turning area. I did submit photographs with my original representation, but for some reason these were not included in the online consultation pack. Vehicles that park in the turning area or on the adjacent pavement at school times force other vehicles onto the private drive serving numbers 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 at the far end of Cotswolds. In any event, people shouldn't park in the turning bay. If no restrictions are placed in that area, I fear that it will make the turning area an even more attractive area to park, thereby making the matter worse. At the very least, I believe the restriction should be placed on the raised curb surrounding the turning area. As far as properties 5 to 9 inclusive are concerned, the turning area is the major problem area in Cotswolds. The proposed restrictions are only for a very limited period at school arrival and departure times, and therefore shouldn't affect friends and family of numbers 3 and 4, who in any event have 2 or 3 parking spaces on their drive. The imposition of restrictions will also have the added benefit of allowing local authority officers to issue parking charge notices in respect to vehicles parked partly on the pavement. Currently, it's my understanding that only the police can do that. I do have photographs of the cars parked in the turning bay at school times, which I'd like to pass up to you, and I have emails as well which supporting the turning area as being not the area to park in from numbers 6, 7 and 8 in Cotswolds.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to accept your photographs, but I can confirm that I am aware that there is parking at that end and have seen that there have been cars in that area. But thank you very much.
As I say, I did submit photographs originally, but they weren't there. And this is the first opportunity one has to argue against the amendment.
Yeah, absolutely. Members all fully believe you when you say that there is parking at that end of the turning circle.
Thank you.
That's what I just want to reassure you. I now would like to ask Ed Annell.
Thank you very much. And I'm Ed Annell, and I live at number 1, Cotswolds, which is right at the beginning of the road. So we already have double yellow lines in that area, but we get a lot of parking outside our property and then on up towards the western end of the close, which does cause a problem for other vehicles entering and leaving the closes, especially at school times. And people do park there for extended periods with engines running and things like that, so not a good thing overall. One of the things I'd like to sort of ask, or at least raise, I know it's probably not something that can be agreed at this point, is enforcement. It's all very well and good. We've seen it with the double yellow lines, that they're there, people ignore them. They really do ignore them. You know, it almost seems like use the double yellow lines as a place we can wait until somebody says we go or we have to go, but there's nobody, or people rarely turn up, parking officials, police, what have you, rarely turn up because they've got better things to do. I totally understand it. With things moving to Winchester or Hampshire, at the end of this month, I don't know what can be done, but I'd like to reinforce the request that enforcement is put on the table somewhere, because that's going to be key. It's going to be successful if it's enforced. If people ignore it, it'll just be a continuation of what's happening now. The other thing I'd like to just mention as well, that Mr. Russell has just brought up, is the original proposal did include the yellow lines, the single yellow lines going to the end of the close and into the parking area. It was a little bit of a surprise to me, as I think it was to other people, that there had been some objections. I understand those from 3 and 4, but it had resulted in the restrictions also being moved across the entrance to numbers 5, 6 and onwards. So I'm a little bit surprised that that was done, because it seems to be sort of contrary to the objections that were raised and contrary to the spirit of what was being, what people were trying to achieve. So I don't know whether an amendment is possible, but I would encourage it as part of the debate. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Just to reassure people, Hampshire County Councillors will most certainly, I'm sure, be receiving a significant, I say this as a county councillor, so I should, and we have another county councillor present as well, Councillor Broomfield. We will be most certainly highlighting with Hampshire any concerns with the changes, particularly when it comes to schools. I just want to get one piece of clarification, because there seems to be a difference of opinion about the extent that was advertised and what we're seeing. So can I just get that clarified, and then I will come to questions from members. Is that all right? Sorry, Toni, I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
So where Andy's cursor is now, can you wiggle it a little bit so that people, that's it. That's the original extent that was advertised for this proposal. And what you see before you is our recommendation. However, councillors can still decide to go with the full extent as per the original advert. The reason that we've taken it down is because of the objection, but also there is another point in that dropped curbs themselves are enforceable with or without a line. So under section 86 of the TMA, a civil enforcement officer, exactly in the same way as they enforce a double yellow line, can ticket cars parking over a dropped curb. However, the one difference is it has to be with the permission of the property owner to which the access relates. So if somebody, for example, wanted to wash their car and was slightly overhanging the footway, in that occasion they wouldn't be doing anything wrong, for example. So really it's over to members to decide whether they want to give that option to residents or go with the full proposal.
Can I just interject? There's not a drop curve all the way around that area. Part is a raised curve.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. We're not allowed to take further comment from the floor. I'm very sorry. I think it would be helpful. Do we have a copy of the original picture so members can see it? Oh, these are the ones that were received by the officers. So we can pass those. Yes. That's a copy of the parking. Could you show it to the other members? Yeah. And there's one on the back. Councillor Marsh.
Right, I have a question, please. I'll look at the pictures in a moment. I want to know, oh, thank you. It's lovely to have them up. I would like to know whether it's possible to make an amendment to almost combine both, so we could extend the line further but exclude the drop curve, because I think the drop curve was, although I understand what you're saying, is it possible to put the lines back in but not cover the drop curbs? Would that be an option?
Yes, within the extent that was originally advertised. So I'm going to ask Andy to go back to the drawing, and I can show you, actually that shows it quite well, didn't it? It's all right, carry on. So can you see where the black bin is? The full height curb comes around to that point, so we can extend to there and then leave the drop curb either unrestricted or, depending on the decision, we can restrict that as well.
Councillor Marsh.
So just to clarify, that would appease the residents of number 3 and 4, if that's what they were asking for. Is that correct?
So the image on the screen now is the area that residents 3 and 4 would like to left unrestricted.
Again, just to clarify, is that all drop curb or not?
Yes, that's existing drop curb.
Thank you.
Councillor Dean.
To be honest, I'm seeing some problems in that. Yeah, a drop curb, I understand. Having driven lorries and doing deliveries for a long time, a turning point's a turning point. And I'd rather see I always like to see turning points kept clear. So, the little bit of double yellow line you'd end up with between the drop curb, end of the drop curb here, 2 paving slabs up, or one curb stone up, round for a couple of feet, isn't actually going to make any difference. I can't see, although the officers, to me, I think, I don't know if the officers would agree, but really it's either a hole or nothing, I would have said. But
Councillor Marsh.
Sorry, so I just want to clarify, in the picture that I'm looking at now, on the right-hand side, that was where the black bin was and the drop curb. this section closest to me in the foreground of this picture, yep, so that drop curb, does that go to just to house number 4 or the house number 4, 5, 6, 7? Are there further properties up this way? So 4 to 9 are on this side. Okay. So going back to the yellow markings, sorry, where they were saying that they didn't want yellow lines there, that image. So on the top part of the picture, that where they're saying they don't want restrictions, so people could park there, that would restrict people accessing their homes. Okay, thank you.
So our members, I need to get this in my head, what members are actually going to propose. So the current extent, it's not for double yellows, is it? It's for waiting restrictions at that far end? Yeah, it was single yellow lines.
Single yellow lines, yeah.
So it's not...
Yes, I mean...
Councillor Couldrey.
I agree with Councillor Dean. I think that the no parking should be in the turning area, and I certainly think that people should not be allowed to block the drives going into those 4 or 5 houses. So I would propose that we extend the waiting restriction to the extent that it was advertised.
Councillor Broomfield.
So I'm still slightly dubious about not. I can understand the reasoning behind not putting a yellow line across the dropped curb that leads between 3 and 4. But what would worry me is, having seen the way people park there, is that people are going to park there anyway because they'll assume that they're not parking up against the curb, they're parking in the middle. So realistically, having been there several times to speak to residents and see the sites myself, if I might use a rude word, it's bloody chaos. And I think if that is not yellow lined, I think people will just keep parking there because they'll see that there's a bit that's yellow lined, leave that, sit in the middle, and I think they'll just carry on doing it. I really think it needs a yellow line there. I can understand why. The only thing I would say is the parking is only a problem during term time. So one thing we could do, which might ease people's concerns, is put a sign up, school term only, because no one's going to park there on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. Does that work? You're shaking your head.
Unfortunately, the legislation won't give us term time only, and that's because different schools have different terms. We can do months, but that doesn't really help because Easter can move between March and April, etc. So unfortunately, that's not an option.
Mondays to Fridays?
Can do Mondays to Fridays?
No, probably schools don't work on Saturdays, so that'd be something. But my feeling is it needs to go all the way.
So the feeling I'm getting from members is that we want the original extent and that we want it to be explicitly Monday to Friday. Does this all... So, okay, is that Councillor Marsh?
My only concern about Monday to Friday, does that mean that on Saturday and Sunday they can block number 5 to 9 and that's not a problem? So I personally think we need to be protecting 5 to 9. So yes, Monday to Friday on the original proposal on all of it, but I am concerned about that entrance to numbers 5 to 9, that needs to be, at no time should anyone ever stop there and stop access to people's homes.
Can I go back to the officer?
So we wouldn't be able to cover it with a line, but the drop curb would cover that side of the provision. Yeah.
Okay, members. So, Councillor Broomfield? Councillor Broomfield is proposing we go back to the original. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Couldrey. Everybody in favour? Yeah. Oh, is that Monday to Friday? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. I'm now moving on to Edward Avenue. I don't believe we have anybody registered to speak on Edward, so I will go straight to Toni to present. Oh yes, of course, if anybody wishes to leave, please don't feel obliged to stay. I mean, you're very welcome.
No, you have to stay.
You have to stay. Thank you all for your presentations. Take care. So now we're moving on to Edward Avenue. I'm going to pass back over to our officer, Toni.
So councillors will be relieved here. This is a standard junction protection marking which reinforces the provisions of the Highway Code, Rule 243, do not park or opposite or within 10 metres of a junction, and no representations were received.
Can I have any questions? Any debate? Can I have a proposer, please? And can I have... right, so I'll take Councillor Dean and then Councillor Marsh seconded him because they were both too quick. And all in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Noel Lane. We're now moving on to Noel Lane. We have no public representation on Noel Lane, and I will hand back to Toni. Thank you.
So this goes back to, I talked about it with Ascot Road. It's the proposal looks to resolve known safety issues along Noel Lane. Noel Lane does have issues with forward visibility at points. It is a busy through road and it leads to several industrial parks further down the road. And we've had representations, 16 objections, but that was with Ascot Road because what's happened is people have taken it as one proposal and done a joint objection, and one representation expressed support.
Any questions, members? Councillor Marsh.
I'm making the most of it tonight. Right, I'm slightly concerned about this one because I live very near there and I use Noel Lane all the time. And other than a couple of vehicles I've had to pass and I've occasionally had to wait, actually I've always had a really clear line of sight. Vehicles, I've never ever seen a vehicle, if I'm travelling from Burnett's Lane across the traffic lights up Noel Lane, I've never ever seen a vehicle parked on the left, ever. I've seen vehicles parked on the right, but people always wait and overtake. So I'm curious about where all these safety concerns were raised. So can I ask where this has come from? Has there been a study that raised these concerns?
We've had some correspondence with the parish, and I believe they cited allotment owners as parking out there, and it may be something to do with gate closure of an evening, but we haven't had anything that specific, just that it causes obstruction. Again, you know, that we are proposing quite a length of double yellow line there, and councillors can reduce that length if needed. The other thing we've had is difficulty in exiting driveways along that section if anything parks between Ascot Road and the westernmost extent of the restriction. So it causes visibility issues when people try to drive out of their driveways. And yeah, I think that's full history. Obviously, the full representations are in the pack, but that's a short summary.
Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. The only representation I've had at all about parking on Noel Lane was about 18 months ago with the residents at, I think, number 12, which is on Noel Lane opposite Goodwood Court, who were having problems there because of vans parking on the verge opposite, outside Goodwood Court. I contacted David Pickett, and then it sort of mushroomed into what we have now. And I have to say, and having read the letter, which obviously everybody received, I think yesterday, from a resident on behalf of other residents, I can sort of see the point he's making, the point that Councillor Marsh is making. I'm just not convinced it needs that sort of draconian outlook on parking along there. I got there quite often. I try and avoid an old lane as a death trap, but you know, it never strikes me as being a particularly difficult place to park. The other thing I would wonder, again, is obviously we know that there has to be work on junctions and what have you connected to one Horton Heath as that comes on. So I'm kind of thinking, given that apart from that parking opposite by Goodwood Court, no one seems to have any problems, is it necessary to do all this when in a couple of years' time they might be digging it all up and starting again, is all I'm sort of thinking.
Thank you, Councillor Broomfield. Any other members? Councillor Couldrey and then Councillor Marsh.
I must say I was astonished that there were 16 objections, because to find 16 people that have actually looked at any of these TROs is well, it's the first time in my experience. And I think it tells us something. So I have to be cautious. I also think that I personally haven't had a lot of problems there. I've had problems going into Ascot Road, and I've had people complaining about that. Personally, I haven't had problems, but I don't use it an awful lot. The parking, there is no pavement, so the thing that does concern me is, would this make it more difficult for pedestrians? Now, I haven't heard that it does, but of course, if the car is parked well into a verge, the pedestrian does have to go round it. So I am a little concerned that we need a way forward for pedestrians. The other thing is, of course, we're always told that parked traffic slows traffic. And if we take all the parking off, I rather suspect that quite a lot of those cars will go a lot faster. So I'm a little bit worried about this proposal. I don't think that it's quite thought through. There are good points in it, and there is a problem that needs to be thought about, but I don't think we're there yet.
Councillor Marsh.
I think I agree with Councillor Couldrey. So I was surprised to hear this came from the parish had anything to do with allotments, because the allotments are round the corner and quite a significant distance from this TRO. So I can't see that the allotments would have any impact whatsoever. And there's separate parking at the allotments, so I can't see that that would have any impact whatsoever. I had heard that a resident at number 12 wasn't happy with people parking opposite him, but it does seem excessive to keep one resident happy. So I personally wouldn't be happy about supporting this as it stands.
The only thing I was going to mention is I do believe that they were locking the gate for the parking at Knoll Park, and I think that or somewhere nearby, and this has disturbed people from what I can remember from what Mel had said, but don't quote me on that. So the only other thing is, even if we have double yellows along this extent, the people like the delivery vehicles will pay zero attention to it. And I want to be really honest about that. Even though they should be paying attention, they're going to be hopping out their vehicle, running in, causing an obstruction for the 5-10 minutes that they're doing that, getting back in their vehicle, and there is just guaranteed that there'll be nobody passing who can put a ticket on their vehicle, even though they are a pain. Clearly needing to do their job, but it does cause frictions and problems for local parking. Okay. So, do members feel that it would be better to kind of almost defer this one and ask it to be considered when 1 Horton Heath are looking at the wider implications for vehicle movements? Councillor Marsh.
I think you said at the beginning we couldn't defer things. So I think unless we had a proper study done of this road, I would be very hesitant. I think I might have been minded to do it if it was just on the one side in front of number 12, but as it stands, I definitely wouldn't support this, and I would be rejecting this proposal tonight.
Councillor Broomfield.
So I just have an inquiring mind. Of the 16 objections, how many could any be allocated solely to the Knoll Lane and not to Ascot Road? And how many would be allocated to Ascot Road and not to Knoll Lane? Because the trouble is, we have 16 objections to the proposal, but what we don't know is which bits of the proposal were top of the hit parade.
Whilst Andy's checking for you, Councillor Broomfield, the other thing I've just been reminded of course, is that we won't be able to defer this because we will no longer have responsibility. So I'm sure there would be nothing wrong with the committee if we were to decide not to support it. And I'm not saying that's what you're going to do, but if that's the way it feels it's going, that this committee then writes to the One Horton Heath committee to make sure it gets picked up, because they will have to work with Hampshire Highways going forward. Does that make sense? So that maybe could be a way forward. Sorry, Councillor Marsh.
I think I agree with that, but I would want a proper study done. So could One Horton Heath, as part of the studies they're carrying out, look at that? And it may not be possible, I realise that, but is it something we could ask for?
I'm not sure we can dictate to One Horton Heath what they should or shouldn't do, but I think we should at least ask them. Councillor Broomfield.
Just sort of connected to this, we had this letter, which I referred to earlier, from a resident representing other residents. I don't want to bring content up, but I think he deserves a response because he makes some interesting points. It's obviously been well researched, but particularly his final paragraph needs rebuttal.
Oh, you're referring to the last one? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the letter we received yesterday, I think.
Yeah. Councillor Marsh?
I think we've addressed that with the amendment to Ascot Road TRO, though, so I don't think that's a problem. I have acknowledged him and thanked him for the comments that he's made, and said we would certainly take all the facts into consideration when we were looking at this proposal.
Do you have an answer?
So Andy at the moment is going through the objections. The reason we can't share it is because it's got people's names and email addresses on it. So that's why it's not up on the projector. We've got 6 that referred to both Ascot, of the objections, Ascot and Knoll Lane, so they objected to both. We've got 4 for Ascot Road alone and 5 for Knoll Lane.
Just before we go into this, would another alternative be to support something like reducing the lines to ensure that those residents, that one resident in particular that did have problems, can still be protected, as because we can reduce the extent as much as we like. What we can't ever do is extend the extent. Councillor Broomfield.
Well, I would be quite happy to propose a motion that we just restrict it to, I'm not quite sure if you describe it as north or east, but the opposite number 15 by Goodwood Court, just to give them safer access, because it's basically vehicles parked on that verge, on the opposite side of the road, which is the issue. So number 12, not number 15. Number 12, I think that stretch along opposite there would benefit from having yellow lines. It would also make life slightly safer for Goodwood Court coming up.
Councillor Marsh.
My only concern about doing that is the residents who are objecting said that by doing that, all we would do is push the problem onto Ascot. Their concern was so few vehicles park along there, but by restricting anyone from parking there, their only alternative would then be to move either further along or to go into Ascot, so we could exacerbate the other problem. So that's my only concern about that.
So, to what extent, sorry, Councillor Broomfield, if we could be really clear about what extent, because it wouldn't be the entire blue length that you're thinking of.
So without actually standing there looking at it on the road, I'd struggle to be entirely specific now, but it's certainly opposite number 12 and for a distance probably about where that cursor is, just really effectively. Perhaps a little bit further, there's a sort of square building a little bit, if you carry on up that way, yeah, about there. But say, the trouble is, without actually standing looking at the place, it's a while since I stood in the garden and spoke to them, but that's the best I can do without actually seeing it on the ground, I'm afraid.
Would anybody like to second Councillor Broomfield? Just for the one section. Councillor Dean. Okay, all those in favour of the amendment, which is the amendment currently is that we reject, is that all of the parking restrictions on the, I don't get the east and left correct, on the left-hand side? The ones at the top would be not there at all, and the ones on the bottom would only extend that far, rather than the entire length. All in favour? That's 2. Any against? That's 2. Yeah, I think perhaps, and then we can make sure we get the line length right as well. Because personally I don't have a problem, but it would be interesting to understand where the existing properties are and where they would be affected in comparison to the other ones. Okay, so my proposal is that we reject the current proposal, but that we as a committee will write to the One Horton Heath committee to ask them to consider Noel Lane in the implications, particularly going forward, and we highlight the problems experienced by properties 12, is it number 12, in particular, to that committee. That's my proposal. Can I have a seconder? Oh, everybody's seconding me. Well, there we go. I think I may have hit the nail on the head. Laura, did my recommendation make sense to you? So we're going to reject the proposal, but instead the committee is going to write to One Horton Heath, and Andy will kindly assist me with that. Thank you very much, Andy and Toni. So now we will move... Pardon? Wait a minute, do I have to get everybody voted? So I proposed it, everybody seconded it, but I do need to have a formal seconder, so I'm going to say... Everybody's okay. Councillor Broomfield can second that, and we all voted on it, and that's unanimous. Thank you. Oh, goodness. Oh, it's a long evening already. Right. We're now moving on to Olympic Way, and we have no speakers, and I'm going to pass back to Toni. Thank you.
This proposal reinforces the provisions of the Highway Code, Rule 243, that you should not park within 10 metres of a junction. No representations were received to this proposal.
Do any members have any questions? There's only one thing I want to raise, which is I am very aware of the parking that occurs around that corner, and it did cause problems for people living up in, officially that's the Spinney, but the junction is with Olympic Way. That's correct, isn't it? I've pronounced it correctly, the Spinney. So that's the part. So can I have a proposer, Councillor Marsh, and a seconder, Councillor Dean, all in favour? Marvellous, that's unanimous. We're moving swiftly on to Rogers Road.
This is Rogers Road junction with Edward Avenue. The proposal reinforces the provision of the Highway Code, Rule 243, which we all know off by heart now, and no representations were received.
Any questions? Any debate? Councillor Dean?
Only thing I've got in debate is one of the things that one of the residents mentioned earlier is about enforcement, and it goes along with all of these. I'm very much in favour of having the double yellow lines. It reinforces what the highway code and legislation actually says anyway. But unfortunately, until we actually get proper enforcement, we're agreeing to something that really hasn't got any teeth. But that's just a personal opinion. I'll still be voting for this no matter what.
I think it's incumbent upon everybody to highlight when there is a problem, and it will no longer be with Eastleigh to go to, but to Hampshire. So can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Dean, followed by Councillor Broomfield. And all in favour. Are you abstaining, Councillor Couldrey? You are in favour. That's unanimous. And now we're moving on to Scottish Square. We have no representation, so I shall pass straight over to Toni. Thank you, Toni.
Thank you. This proposal seeks to remove obstructive parking which affects refuse collection for local residents. No representations were received.
Any questions? Can I have any debate? Can I have a proposer? Councillor Marsh. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dean. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Now we're moving on to Spring Lane. We again have no representations, and I shall pass back to Toni to take us through it.
That proposal was the junction with Church Road, so we've already made the decision with that one. It just has to be listed separately.
That makes sense. So now we'll be moving on to St Mary's Road, and I was quite surprised by this one. Have we received any comments? No, we've got no representation, so I shall pass over to Toni for this one.
The proposal seeks to remove parking obstructing turning movements at the end of the cul-de-sac of St Mary's Road. No representations were received.
Any questions or comments? We're not sure where this one came from because it really is a little cul-de-sac that doesn't go anywhere. So the only people parking down there are the local residents. And I have not heard a single squeak from anybody that there was a problem. So I'm surprised it's appeared. That's all. Okay then, can I have a proposer? Councillor Dean, a seconder. Councillor Broomfield, all in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to the Drove. I do have one person wishing to make representation. So what we shall do is we will turn to Toni first and then we will go to the presenter. Thank you. Toni.
Thank you. This proposal was in response to complaints about parking near the junction with a shared drive which serves 3 residential properties affecting sightlines from the shared driveway. One objection was received to this proposal.
Thank you very much. Could I now ask Michael Mangan, I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, sir, if you would like to come and present to the committee.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Michael Mangan. I live at number 13. My immediate neighbour, not marked as a note as a house number there, Marjorie Young, also concurs with these comments. She's in her 80s and she is an active car user. I've not spoken to my neighbour at number 17. The Drove was built in the 1980s and in contradiction to the proposal's assertion, I'm not aware of any issues relating to sightlines until this point in time. The objection attached to this proposal contains photographs which you should be able to look at in support of my assertion that the sightlines and the view round the bend are more than adequate to allow vehicular traffic to safely exit our shared drive without any risk or danger. The pictures are representative of the sightlines and the traffic density on a typical day. The view to the right of our drive allows clear sight of traffic entering the shallow bend, about 25 to 30 metres from our drive exit. It's worth noting, and possibly the reason behind the proposal, that last summer 2 properties in adjacent closes underwent building work about the same time, and for a number of weeks there was a notable increase in traffic density. However, the sightlines were in no way compromised by the increase in parking density, and vehicles proceeding into the drive presented no issues. And this was an isolated event, as I said, may have given reason to the proposal. The comments attached to the report, that's the engineering report I believe you referred to it as, failed to highlight my chief view and that of my neighbour and other use of the drive, that's visitors and family members, that the introduction of the proposals is not required as sightlines are more than sufficient, ensuring there is no danger to person or other traffic using the road and there is no impediment for facilitating the passage of vehicular traffic on the road. These conditions being presented as justification for the proposal in the statements of reasons. It should be noted that residents of the drive have always shown respect to access parking appropriately, and should this proposal be implemented, on-street parking options will become squeezed, and the current the current respectful approach will now no doubt suffer. Given that we contend the sightlines are quite adequate, there's no associated safety risk. Implementation of this proposal would appear to go against Section 122, Paragraph 1 of the Road Traffic Act, the provision of suitable and adequate parking facilities. I would also draw attention to the fact of what Councillor Couldrey mentioned before, that research has shown that parked vehicles do have a presence or do have an impact on slowing down vehicles. By restricting traffic, putting these restrictions in place, there is no doubt that traffic will increase speed round that bend, increasing the danger not only to us exiting our shared drive, but also to other residents. And we may have to petition for traffic calming measures to be applied. In conclusion, this traffic regulation order is not believed to be appropriate or required, would be an inefficient use of council and taxpayers' money, and would no doubt generate additional dangers within the drove, and as such I request it set aside. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Marsh.
Surprise, surprise. I just wanted to clarify, because if I'm understanding this correctly, the proposal is to clear the line of sight for residents 13, 15 and 17, but the objection that we received is from property 13 and 15 potentially as well. So the very people we are proposing we're going to help are the people who are saying, please don't, we don't want this. Is that correct?
We're not permitted to identify where the complaint came from. What I would say is that, like we've talked about tonight, Provision 243 of the Highway Code says any junction minor onto major or minor onto minor, you should have 10 metres of clear visibility. The objection was included, it's page 25 of your pack, which shows 2 photographs, the lines of sight out of that driveway. Are you able to show that? So that's the view, as the gentleman says, actually sat inside a car, and you can see a small vehicle parked there. If that was something larger, it might obscure visibility. It would obscure visibility, but this is a cul-de-sac, and speeding in particular should not be an issue. So again, it's over to members to debate this, and the same options apply.
Thank you very much. Councillor Broomfield, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. So the picture is taken. So the right-hand picture is looking back towards Botley Road. That, I mean, I don't go down the Drove very often, but I would say that's a fairly typical sort of picture. So we don't have any evidence of this problematic parking other than that photo. Is that the case?
This is a photo that's not been provided by the engineers. This is through an objection. the proposal came or was prioritised on the basis that we'd had complaints, not photographs.
So what I'm getting at, I mean, someone has complained, obviously, and there's not really been any great, dare I say, research into how big the problem is. What I'm trying to get at is, you get a complaint, we end up with this proposal, but there must be at some point in between you getting the complaint and the proposal coming forward that there's been some research into what the complaint's about and how serious the problem is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we will recommend on the provisions of the Highway Code. To us, people shouldn't be parked on the bend anyway and shouldn't be within 10 metres of the junction. So we will, at the very minimum, go for those Highway Code provisions because we should all drive in that way anyway. Whether you choose to reinforce those using weighting restrictions is over to you.
Councillor Marsh.
I have actually been up that driveway because I think it's where I used to visit a gentleman at number 17, and I used to deliver some literature to that road that maybe they wanted or didn't want. But I've never had a problem with that road. There is so little traffic on that road at the best of times. If there's a car or possibly a delivery van may turn up, but there isn't significant movement on traffic of that road. And I think if we went on the basis of us doing restrictions on the 10 metres to each junction, then we have to put lines and restrictions on every single junction around the area. The Highway Code says don't park within that distance, so I'm not sure what we're achieving by these lines. So personally, I'm not quite sure what the point is, although I understand why somebody's complained. But the frequency with which people park there, I can't see it being a real problem on such a quiet cul-de-sac.
Just for clarification, I believe that if you have the lines there, then it's enforceable by the enforcement officers, whereas the rest would have to be enforced by the police. And that is often why we seek to have lines, Councillor Marsh. Because I absolutely agree with you, we should not have to be sitting here putting in lines around Longmead and into Rogers and across around all these junctions, because people should be fully aware and cited on the Highway Code and know that they're not supposed to park there. But unfortunately, people don't act like that because sometimes people forget that their convenience is actually an obstruction. But I have to agree with you that it looks like a small cul-de-sac. It doesn't look like a major thoroughfare. So members, we need to propose and second it. That doesn't mean you have to support that, if that makes sense. So first of all, I'm going to have to, unless somebody has any more they wish to debate. Councillor Dean first.
Age before beauty.
Oh, thank you. I think it's very much, looking at it, very much a sledgehammer to crack an egg. And personally, I'll be making a proposal that we just withdraw it from there.
We don't need to propose that. We just have to vote against. We'd have to all vote against it. Right.
Just going to say, coming back, I went there a couple of times last summer, and the building work you mentioned was absolute chaos. There were two houses sort of further down. It was just like a builder's yard, and there were vans and things everywhere. So I can see where, if this comes from that point, yeah, I could fully understand that. Do you want me to propose this so we can?
Do you need to propose it and second it? Can somebody second, please? Anybody want to second? You have to second it, otherwise we can't debate, we can't vote on it. Yeah, Councillor Marsh is going to second. Right, all in favour? All against? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. And now, now we have to move on to recommendation 2, which is about the removal of waiting restrictions at Church Road and Knoll Lane. I'm going to hand over to Toni to present, and we have no public representation on this matter. We're on to recommendation 2. Are you happy with, you have an answer for all of your previous recommendations? Thank you very much for clarifying.
Okay, so recommendation 2 is purely administration around recommendation 1. So these are parts of the existing TRO we need to revoke to be able to move ahead with some of the provisions that we've already talked about this evening. So there's... Sorry. So just to explain, that's a good way of explaining it. If we were to, and I know we're not going ahead with this one, but if we were, we would revoke from where Andy's arrow is all the way through and then come back with a new provision for the full extent. And that's to allow enforcement along the whole section without any breaks. And it's purely to make it tidy from a legal perspective.
So with that in mind, we would have to support it based on our previous recommendations, because otherwise we would be asking you to revoke something which we don't need revoked. Is that correct? Oh, I got something right, members. Can I have any questions? Oh, Councillor Marsh.
I'm really sorry, I didn't understand that at all, because when you were saying revoking that, that sounded like the current restrictions which are there we're going to get rid of, and we're not going ahead with all the other bits, so why would we want to revoke this bit?
We're not, Councillor Marsh, that was my point. My point was that we were only going to agree the ones that we have agreed under section 1. Yeah, so that would be only Church Road. Yeah.
Church Road, yeah.
Does this make sense now? Do we have to vote on... Yes. With that in mind, can I have a proposer? Councillor Marsh and a second to Councillor Broomfield. All in favour, and that is to approve A and to ignore Part B, which is the Knoll Lane. Yes. Excellent. Are you happy with that? Thank you. I believe that completes. Thank you so much to our officer. It's been a mammoth go. I'd like to thank all the people that came and made representations to us, because it does help us as councillors to understand everybody's lived experiences. Now we're going on to item 7. If anybody would like to leave, you are welcome to. We'll be... Does anybody want a break for 5 minutes? Everybody good to continue? Yes? Okay. I will go on to item 7, which is the Stoke Park Farm consultation response. We received this as a late paper. Yeah, I have got it as a late paper. Oh, this keeps closing. I'm going to... I don't think we need to have this formally presented, do we? Or no, do we? Yeah. Is Councillor Tidridge still with us? I'm very sorry. She may have wanted to speak on the TRO. She hasn't mentioned anything. Councillor Tidridge, is there anything you would like to add to your report?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. First of all, huge thank you to Eastleigh Borough Council officers, including Laura, including Andy, in terms of facilitating me being able to speak to you tonight. I'm afraid I'm in London for work, so I was unable to make this meeting. What I tried to do with the report, well, the response you can see in front of you, is to pull together a lot of the discussions that we've had about Stoke Park Farm. And I've been really heartened, to be honest, by just how unified our approach has been. Stoke Park Farm over the years has been quite a divisive issue locally, and it's been so lovely that we've all had very strong feelings and all those strong feelings have been pulled together into one document that I think gives quite a cohesive response to the consultation. In terms of what we're trying to do with this consultation response is it all hinges around the motion that this committee passed on the 9th of March 2022 when we debated and discussed how much we liked the idea of Stoke Park Farm being transferred into a local nature reserve. I can't remember what the wording of the motion was, but certainly in our discussions we were all very keen on the idea of a local nature reserve being established. The reason for this being that this is a site which has huge potential in terms of biodiversity, as well as the nitrate offset and potentially phosphate offset, which was the purpose for which it was purchased. So it's got a huge potential. Some of the really good features of this site, there are fields that join, have the potential to join Upper Barn Copse with Crowd Hill Copse. The topography of the site slopes down towards tributaries of the Itchen. Those of us who know the site know that it's already a real haven for wildlife. Many of us see deer there quite frequently, but I've also been assured by a neighbour down the road that looking across the fish farm is actually a remarkably good bird watching spot already. So the idea of transferring and gradually converting this site into an area where nature, where wildlife comes first, is something which in itself will be of huge benefit to the local community. Being able to see nature, connect with nature, has huge benefits in terms of mental health, physical health, well-being, and I think it's really going to be a huge, well, it's already a fantastic amenity for our area and will continue to be so. So some of the things we'd like to see from the council in terms of how it approaches Stoke Park Farm, we'd like to see, in addition to this idea of moving towards the local nature reserve, I don't think any of us had any objections to this being in steps, as opposed to create all a local nature reserve in 2024, for example. I don't think any of us really expected that to be the case. So ensuring that this happens in a way that fits in with the developer funds, the developer credits coming in, additional grants coming in as things develop, I think we were all very much in favour of. Although we certainly did express the view that in terms of starting to make this transfer to nature, should start off with the fields that join Upper Barn Copse and Crowd Hill Copse, something which Councillor Couldrey was particularly good at explaining why that was so important to the area. And we'd like to see a timetable, because a timetable will help to give reassurance that this is something which the council intends to do. In terms of our objectives for the site, it's very much around the idea of nature and the community. But we do have some principles which we would like to return in this response. The first principle is that we shouldn't be putting amenities in only for them to have to be removed at a later date. So whatever we put in there for the community, we don't want to see subsequently having to be removed. The second thing is traffic. Sewell Road Housing Estate was never designed to be a through. The road going through there was never designed to be a through road for a lot of traffic. It acted as access to the farm, but certainly when you look at the layout of the houses, the layout of the road, and indeed the road surface, it's not designed to be something which lots of traffic goes over. And certainly speaking to a lot of people locally, I don't think there would be very much support for this being used for a lot of traffic. That in itself places restrictions on what we can do with the farm buildings. So one of the principles that we've expressed in this response is that perhaps the council could take the level of traffic movements, the level of car parking that has taken place on the site when it was operational as a dairy farm, and use that as a guided limit to the number of vehicle movements, to the amount of car parking. That's going to help to shape what can and cannot be done to the farm buildings. Councillor Marsh made the case very well that although I believe that private renting out of the farmhouse is in discussion, that something that could be considered is for that to be a live-in house for somebody acting as caretaker, as manager for the site. Quite a smart idea, so we've included that one in the report. We've suggested that in terms of what happens to the buildings, that idea of restricting traffic movements is really important. That idea of this should be somewhere that sits in the middle of a space of nature is really important. We wouldn't want to see heavily polluting activities taking place. We wouldn't want to see activities take place that disturb the tranquility of the area and that make it a less attractive proposition for nature and wildlife. So that's going to place some restrictions, but we know that there are a lot of clever people looking at this site, and I'm sure they can come up with some really smart ideas for what happens there, but very much within that idea of restricting traffic movements and therefore restricting car parking. This does mean that some of the ideas that were proposed in the document are not going to be appropriate. Very sadly, because I do quite like the idea, a cafe isn't going to work. A cafe is not going to work simply because for a cafe to be financially viable, to be economically sustainable, it's going to need lots of people to use it. A lot of people using it will mean that more traffic movements and more car parking is unfortunately going to be inevitable. So I think that's a good example of something which, although it sounds like it's got some really good positives, isn't going to work in reality. So it's going to be incumbent on the council to come up with some clever ideas about what to do with the buildings. We try to be really positive in this document in terms of what could happen to the site. One of our proposals is that we look into improving the bridleway, keeping it as a bridleway, very much keeping it as a bridleway, but improving the bridleway all the way from the junction between Sewell Drive and Stoke Common Road and the Fox and Hounds, which is something that at the moment you can use it on a horse, you can use it on a mountain bike, and you can certainly walk and run on it, but making it so that it's something that bikes other than mountain bikes could use, and that's something that there are already a small number of people who use it as a commuting route even, but getting it so that it's a strong, green, sustainable transport option within our area, I think that could be a really good positive to the area. And this response includes a number of other positive ideas. Something, though, less positive is making sure that whatever happens on the site is done in a way that is mindful that antisocial behaviour is something we don't want to see happen on the site. There's been an unfortunate unintended consequence at the cemetery extension car park of drug dealing taking place on that unused car park, and other antisocial behaviour there, as reported by our local police. So we need to be careful that we don't turn Stoke Park Farm into another opportunity for that kind of behaviour, another reason for wanting to restrict the number of cars accessing the site. Other risks include there's been a lot of fly tipping in the area, particularly in the car park for Stoke Park Woods. And there is always a risk of illegal encampments, and indeed fly camping is something that's taken place in various areas as well. So it's just making sure that this area is kept in a condition which is congruent with what we'd like to have to us in the long term, i.e. becoming a place for nature that will be hugely beneficial for local residents and other people visiting the area, but the visiting should be very much done in a way that is not going to result in inconsiderate parking and large amounts of traffic going through a housing estate that was never designed to have that housing estate. Thank you very much indeed for listening to me. I don't know how clearly it's come across in the hall, and again a huge thank you to the officers for enabling me to speak tonight. Very much appreciate it. And also a huge thank you to all the members who contributed towards being able to pull this response together. And it's been lovely to pull something together that really, where we've all been very vociferous in our desire for something really positive to happen on this site that will work for nature and work for our community. Thank you very much indeed. Thank
you, Councillor Tidridge, and you came through loud and clear. members. As you will recall, this was previously our motion, and I know we have all discussed it before, and Councillor Tidridge resent it out with the amendments following that debate to ensure that all of those were included. This is the response from this committee. This does not preclude any member putting in additional representations on any aspect that they would like to see that may not have been covered in here. So this is why this is I suppose, slightly restricted in some ways, because, you know, not everybody will agree on absolutely everything, and that's absolutely fine. But as a committee, we did agree that the nature reserve was our original motion, and now we've moved to this. So, do we do this as a formal question? So, do anybody have any questions, and additionally to go to Councillor Tidridge? No? Okay. Does anybody have any debate? Oh, I'm going to start by thanking Councillor Tidridge, because you worked really, really hard to pull this together, and it's not easy because we are a disparate and difficult group, as she knows. If you saw, I think you may have been facing the other way and did not see some of the behaviour previously. So, any further debate, and I do know we have talked at this ad nauseum at the last team meeting, which was only a week away. Okay, can I have a proposer? Councillor Marsh, that was very quick. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Dean, nearly Councillor Broomfield. You see, it's still happening, Jim. And can I have all those in favour of us submitting this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Any against? Any abstentions? I did ask. Councillor Couldrey, would you like to come back before?
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I just didn't get it. You know, my mistake. I want to say, first of all, that I think this is an excellent paper. It clearly shows a lot of work and a lot of very good ideas. And frankly, to have got all the disparate ideas that were put out by various members and to reduce them to 6 or 7 pages, a fairly consistent approach is a little short of a miracle, but it's pretty good. Obviously, you say no two people agree about everything, and that's absolutely right. I think there are some things that need to be amended or adjusted, or I'd give less emphasis to. The thrust I support generally, but I am going to abstain on this because I do, purely on a technical approach, that I do feel that we need to have an ability to say, even though the BIFO's done this, I think that. And that's my position on this. Thank you.
So with that in mind, we've got 4 in favour and 1 abstention. Any abstentions? Councillor Couldrey. Noted. Okay. Now we are coming on to a tabled item, because I did say I would put off my chair speech from the beginning. So we're going to come on to a late tabled item. I'm going to ask Andy to present to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is in regards to the community cafe of Shorts Road, New Century Park, which is from Fair Oak Parish Council. Just to give it a bit of background, a reminder to everyone, this was the business case was first agreed by the Parish Council back in May 2021. The building design in July 2021, with a project budget of around about £386,000 in July 22. Planning approval was achieved in February 2022. Remember, there's quite a long, drawn-out demolition of the Scouser, which was eventually demolished in June 2022. In terms of this committee, we were asked for funding, which we approved £158,000 towards the project on the 10th of March 2021. Subsequently, due to various enhancements of green infrastructure, a further request of £60,000 was approved in, when was that? It was on was the last meeting? Yeah, the first, no, I've got the wrong date there. It wasn't 1st of February. Sorry, it was in January the 26th, 2022. So that's a little bit of a background. Now, the reason this is a late table item was due to the committee cycle. The request came to us outside of the time for me to prepare a finance report, so it was too late for this committee. What that meant was, due to obviously the upcoming elections, the next committee here is not until June. Now, that would cause potentially significant extra costs with that delay to the project. The request is for £28,750, which is roughly about half of some additional costs. Now, these additional costs have resulted due to the soil testing, which have indicated that there needs to be deeper piling. And the solution would be for the piled raft, which would include reinforced concrete slab and a network of concrete piles. So again, this came in quite late. It's a bit of a shock to the parish council. In terms of them as well, they'd already set their precept, so they couldn't add that to the council precept, and they're already quite dangerously low in terms of what they're allowed in their minimum reserves. They have tried to help with this and met halfway on the cost and requesting roughly half the cost, the total extra cost, which would be £62,714. Now, in terms of the developer contributions proposed, and they are listed. I think, does everyone have a handout? Yeah. Everyone has a handout. I won't read them out. But again, in terms of the recommendation, this would be actually formally approved retrospectively the next one, and that would be set out for the public. So the recommendation is that this committee approve in principle the allocation of developers' contributions as outlined above. This decision would be subject to formal approval retrospective at the BIFO-LAC on the 28th of June 2023.
Do we have any questions, members? Do we have any debate? Councillor Marsh.
I think it's probably less of a debate and more of a thank you, Andy, for bringing this to us so quickly, because I think it would have put the parish council in a difficult position if they'd had to wait until the June meeting. So I think your proposal of us agreeing this in principle is quite a sensible approach, and so I'm grateful that you put the effort in, so thank you to you for doing that.
Any other debate? There, of course, is potentially £64,911, which we previously allocated to the community library. I'm sure you'll all recall this, because it's come to my attention that it's not going to be BIFO paying for that, because in a local publication it stated Eastleigh Borough Council's Liberal Democrat Council has just funded to save Fair Oak Library. So if Eastleigh Borough Council's Liberal Democrat Council are funding the library, we must have a spare pot of almost £65,000, which I was not aware of, because it can't be Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath Local Area Committee that did that funding, because it's not controlled. And it wasn't the full council that took that decision. I may be misled, but that could come in very useful, because I could think of lots of places where £65,000 could be now spent, personally. Any other debate on this topic? Councillor Marsh.
I would just like to say that I had no knowledge of anything being published to that, with that information, and actually I can validate that certainly it was this BIFO-LAC that did make that decision, but I would like us to proceed with agreeing this in principle.
Right, well, we will need a...
Could I raise a point, a request?
Councillor Couldrey.
Isn't this committee a committee of the council?
Oh, you could say this is a committee of the council, but it said quite clearly of a very specific party had agreed. Now, given that that party doesn't have the majority here, I would think that would be highly difficult to achieve, actually. And it said the council. So if the council has agreed it, that means there's quite a lot of extra money left for this committee to spend, I would personally suggest. Anybody like to propose or second this? We have Councillor Marsh proposing. Anybody like to second? Councillor Broomfield. All in favour in principle, and it has to be discussed and decided outside of this meeting because we are only at the beginning of stage of this. All in favour? Okay, thank you, members. Right, I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. And I can now go back to my chair's report. Oh, and I was going to talk about how we've got £65,000 extra to spend. So I just wanted to say goodbye to Councillor Dean, because Councillor Dean will no longer be serving on this committee going forward. So we thank you for your 5 years as a member of Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath Local Area Committee. And I'm sure that the other members will wish you well. Who knows what the makeup of this committee will be going forward? And I wish whoever takes the role of chair very much luck in the future. It's going to be interesting times ahead for BIFO. And yeah, but they will have 65 grand to spend, so, you know. This concludes the meeting. Our next meeting will take place on the 28th of June, 2023. Back here again at the Woodland Community Centre. Councillor Broomfield.
Before we all go home, can I just say I really enjoyed it. It's very nice sometimes being the only Tory in the village because I can just sit here and watch everybody else kick bits out of each other and just sit there quite quietly and mind my own business. So thank you. Keep it up.
It just brings a smile to my face. So thank you, everyone. Safe travels and see you in June.